Well, one thing about being here on the farm is I shower less. If that's makes some people scared, maybe. Well, we have to cross-cut our pieces that we ripped yesterday, and so today I'm just going to talk about like cross-cutting, different options that we have at the school, and why we're going to do what we do. Remember, the project's about learning, so I'd like to show you a couple of different things. Before you start, we have about 30 squares at the school, and not all of them are square. So before you grab one, I just want to make sure that you have a square that you trust, and it's pretty easy to share a square. So if we make a couple squares square, we find a couple squares that are square, then we should be able to have enough to go around. So what I'm doing is, how do you test if a square is square? Well, it should agree with itself. So I've gone to the table saw because I trust this edge is very straight, and I'm going to take my square and I'm going to put it on that edge, and I'm going to make a line along that side of the square. Now, if that is indeed a square line from the square, if I switch it around, it should agree with itself. So if I make a second line, right on that line, they should be the same line. And what you'll find with many squares is that this will not be the case. You'll square from one side, you'll turn it around, and you will get a line that is not parallel to the other line. This square has been squared. There's this random piece of tape here on the board SX measure table to indicate that, so I remember it's square. If you can look here, it wasn't square. I squared it. This mark here is from a punch. So if your square is out of square, you can square it up by either spreading the tongue and the body or pulling them back together just by punching the steel. So this is a punch mark that I've made with a punch, and when I hit it here, it would have spread the tongue and the body from each other. If I would have punched it here with a hammer, it would have pushed them back together. So this one has been squared, piece of tape's on it, I trust it. So that's one thing. All right, so once you have a square that you trust, you're thinking to yourself, probably from your earliest knowledge, that the compound miter saw is the best thing for cross-cutting. It's what you always use. So table saw is ripping, compound miter saw will be for cross-cutting, which is not wrong. So if we walk over here to the compound miter saw, here's where I do lots of my cross-cutting. The compound miter saw is great for cross-cutting. I find though, on pieces this long, our box is going to be a 14-inch cross-cut. First of all, many saws can't cross-cut 14 inches. This one does. The Bosch axial glides at the school also cross-cut 14 inches, but just barely. And you've got your piece at 14 1/4, so it's barely going to make it across. You will be disappointed with the finish though on the compound miter saw. It will not be as square as it can be. This is a radial arm saw, and the radial arm saw I find cuts really square. Mine cuts really square. The other thing you do with the radial arm saw is when you draw your line, that you can control kind of where your saw guides along your square line, and you can keep it on the line just kind of by your arm strength, which is very nice. We don't have a radial arm saw at the school. They're dated. They've definitely been replaced in the industry lots of times by the compound miter saw. The other thing about my radial arm saw is it only glides to about 12 inches. Now you can move the fence back, and I could maybe squeeze 14 inches out of it, but again, not my best option, and we don't have one at the school, so we won't be doing that. So if we X any of these two options, because although this one might work, I don't think you're going to be happy with the results, and we don't own this saw. What we have at the school is a table saw sled. Now, the one that's at the school is the one I built, so I don't have one here. But you'll find on the table saw that there is a sled that was built that fits right inside the T-slots, and you can take it and you can slide and easily cross-cut a piece of material, and that's going to be a great option for you. It won't be hard to figure out. You can find that and do that. Other options that I have for you is the track saw. So cross-cutting with the track saw is also a great idea. This is the school's track saw. So you won't find it at the school because I have it. So with the track saw, you can lay down some sacrificial boards like this. And then I'm going to grab my piece. My 14¼ inch piece. Like this. And the track saw goes on a track and simply guides itself on the track, and I can cross cut. So I can measure 24 inches, I can line up the track saw, and I can make this cut without diving into the table just by being on top of some sacrificial boards, and we could do that. Again, kind of hard to judge, and that's why I've kind of gone away from this a little bit. Track saw is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I think we have a better option for you in grade 10. And one of them would be the table saw sled. So if you use the table saw sled, that's fine, you can figure that out. Remember, you got to cut a 24, a 14, a 24, and a 14. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing you have at the school, and it's located by the dust collection system room in the racks, is a jig made for a skill saw, or made for a portable circular saw. And it looks something like this. Alright, so if you don't use a table saw sled, I would advise that you find this. It's an easy jig to make. It's often made by carpenters for cutting soffit, so lengths of aluminum soffit for exterior finish on a house, and it works very well. So how it works for you is that you'll be able to slide your 14¼ inch piece into here, like so, and then you'll be able to find, it'll be one of the Makita skill saws that fits into this track, like so, and it's gonna guide along. Now before I go, and before you go, you might want to make a blade switch. And so I saved me from switching my blade in case you have to. It'll be a 13mm wrench or an Allen key in my situation. Before you ever change a blade, you should remove the power supply. I'll remove one of the batteries. And then somewhere you should find an arbor lock. So not always in the same location, but it'll be a button that locks the arbor or the shaft of the motor from turning. So lock your arbor, and then you can either find a 13mm wrench or an Allen key to unturn this. Remember, it's going to be it's not reverse threads. Often they're reverse threads, but this one is not. Just be careful. Any circular saw blade often is reverse threads because they want the nut to tighten with the torque of the blade when it starts up. Okay. So with a new blade on here, like so, pressing that arbor lock again. Oh, missed it. There it is. Tighten it up. Get that blade on there. My Allen key stores away really nicely. Don't know if you'll have that. All right. The other thing is you're gonna have to set the depth of the saw. The last thing you want to do is cut right through the jig and cut the jig in half. So you're gonna have to find, the saw depth. If I slide this out of the way. You can either add the material in your head and protrude the blade the right amount, or you can pull up alongside your jig and just make sure that the blade is not cutting through any deeper than it has to. It just has to make its way to the table. So, not cutting through the jig, just deep enough to cut through the material it's trying to cut through. Okay, I guess back to this. So the couple of things you have to know about this jig, and that it was set up. It was set up to this right here. This track is square to this fence. So you're always going to want to put your best edge of your plywood. If you remember from the last day, you either have a factory edge, but you probably have one side. This is 14¼ right now because we're going to cut it again. And so whatever side you want to cut off again, you should put to this side of the saw and put your best edge against this fence. So your best edge against this fence, because that's what's going to keep it square. All right, before I start here, I got to cut a 24, I know, to start. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide my tape measure until I hit the blade under the saw, and I'm going to make a mark at 24. And while I'm at it, I might as well make a mark at 14. Like so. With a square, I'll just make these marks a little more emphasized and perhaps label them. So here's my 24. Here's my 14, like so. And then I should be able to cut, in my case, the way I wanted the grain to wrap was to cut the 24, 14, 24, 14. Now, something else should be said that I'm about to make a mistake on. This is a portable circular saw. The cutting action is on the upstroke when the blade cuts, which means the exit wound will be on the top. So you're going to want to put your good side down. So my piece here, I was looking for this to be the outside of the box. So I'm going to put that side down so that there's less tear out. Now, before I even start, I'm just looking at my piece of wood, and I know I have extra, and so I'm going to get rid of this tear out before I even start. So I'm going to kind of just put this, so I think I'm cutting it off. And I'm going to track and cut off that little 1 inch material. Ooh. Okay, got about the same tear out. I was hoping with my new blade that I wouldn't. So we're going to see how this goes. Now, I'm not too concerned about it for the fact that I didn't make the mistake of putting the good side up. So this is going to be the inside of the box, and the construction of our box, the first ½ inch is going to be a rabbet. So we're going to have a rabbet that goes in the first ½ inch of the box. So it's going to take care of most of that tear out. But just will be interesting to see if I go a little slower and try that again. Maybe I can get rid of what just happened. Okay. There, that looks a lot better. Okay, now I gotta keep the fence clean the whole time. So make sure you have that fence clean, and make sure your material is always tight against this fence. In some cases, I actually take some shims and I ram shims in this location so that the material is always tight against this fence, which I'm squaring off of. All right, so here we go. Looks like if I go slow enough, I won't have as much tear out. So my first piece is gonna be a 24, so I'm just gonna line that up to my 24-inch mark. Material's tight against the fence, and I'm going to cut my first 24-inch piece. Okay. Now, it's a good check when you cut your first piece, or maybe I should do my first cut, is this indeed cutting square? And it looks to be perfect, so that's great. Now, as it comes out of here, you remember you want to grain wrap. So as it comes out, start numbering it. So this is 1, is what I'm going to go with. And then I'm going to cut a 14, because I want it to grain wrap. So here comes a 14. And then I could right away put a 1, so that 1 matches up to 1. So it folds over when I build it. Pretty nice. So that'll be a 2. Then I'm going to go back to a 24-inch piece. Again, keep checking your fence, it's clean. You can keep a leaf blower or a shop vac close if you want to keep that fence clean. I fell behind my numbers here. This would be a 2. Ooh, that's not cool. Didn't make it through. you know, 3 is to 3. And my last cut will again be a 14, like so. Same problem. Guess I was just barely with the depth of my saw. All right, your last piece is not going to match up to anything. You could put a 4, but again, it's unmatching. It's going to wrap around the box to the initial cut you made, and it's not going to grain wrap anyway. So we'll keep the back. This is what I'm left with. You won't have the water damage that I had on mine. This piece is an extra. It's not big enough for really anything unless you mess up one of your side cuts, but you hope you don't, because then the grain won't wrap the way you want it to. Although it is the best option because it's the last piece you have from this sheet of plywood that at least the pattern or at least the color will match. The last thing you can do while you're at that jig is that, remember, you have a piece that says save for top and bottom. So a sheet of plywood, I mean, it's oversized, but it's about 8 feet. So I'm gonna just put a 4-foot mark here, like so, kind of roughly. It's not real important. In fact, I could make it, I know the sheet is oversized, so I'm gonna make it 4-foot 1/4 inch. Right there, so not 4 foot, but 4-foot 1/4 inch. And then I'm gonna take that, one of those ripped cuts that we made. Again, make sure the good side is down. And I'm just gonna cut this in half-ish, so that my partner has half and I have half. Again, make sure your best side is against the fence, the side that you trust. And you can take the sheet, cut it generally in half. I should have set my saw deeper. There we go. Okay, so now you've got 2 halves. One is going to be top and bottom for partner, and the other one will be for you. And now you no longer need to be with your partner because you've got all your own pieces to make the box. Now, we are going to focus on these pieces because these are the pieces that get all the joinery, the rabbets that we're going to make. And this piece, you can put your name on it and set it aside somewhere safe, maybe in the lumber racks. Put them all together, like the whole class can put their pieces together. As long as your name's on it, we'll find it in a week's time when we need it. Last thing before we go, I just want to remind you, these pieces have been ripped and cross-cut, but remember they were oversized ripped. So we should take these pieces to the table saw. And we have to get them to exactly 14. So last step is, okay, now you gotta be careful with a few things. Remember, we grain wrapped. So piece 3, the grain perfectly matches up to piece number 3. And so if we're gonna cut, you know, this to 14, from 14 to 1/4, we're gonna remove a 1/4 inch. We're gonna make sure we remove the 1/4 inch from the same side. Now, there shouldn't be a problem because you've been keeping track of one side that you think you're gonna re-rip anyway, right? So when I take these pieces, remember, now it's a table saw, so this being my bad side and this being my good side, on a table saw, I want the good side up, not down, because the cutting action is on the downstroke. So I'm gonna take all my pieces, and remember, I didn't have a bad cut, but you may have, you may kept track of it. All my pieces came out of the other saw, and they're all still lined up, so I'll be cutting off the same side so the grain, you know, still, I'll be certain that the grain still wraps. And so I'm gonna take all the pieces. This time it's important, I'm gonna set the saw perfectly to 14 inches, measuring to 1 tooth, right to 14 inches. And then this is the opportunity I've been waiting for, to take smaller pieces of wood and cut off the bad side that might have happened when I was doing the whole sheet of plywood, right? That I might have got a little wobble when I made the cut. All right, so the only thing about cutting pieces this big is the danger of this piece, you know, being thrown back at you, because it's like a, you know, especially the square looking ones, the 14-inch pieces, if this blade grabs this piece, if it comes away from the fence at all, the blade won't actually kick it straight back. The blade will grab it and spin it. And we've had a couple of these happen in the last few years. So just be careful. When you're running this piece through, it's both hands. There's 14 inches here. You need to make sure that your force is against the fence and down, and that you keep the piece flat on the table. So as you turn this on, I got one hand here, one hand at the back, and my eyes are on the fence, right? And when I get here, I'm going to switch my feet. And danger, don't stop here. You got to go all the way through. And then you can clear your hands. Now your hands were here, so none of this. Your hands were here, they both go to the right. So then you can just continue with your stack of material all the way through. Hands don't go over the blade. Just a warning, don't be too anxious to grab these scraps. They're not hurting anybody. You can wait till the blade stops and throw those away. And then let's just kind of verify what we've done. Everything went through the table saw now. It's all going to be the exact same height because it went through at the same time. And now if we wanted to, we could start thinking about our box, and you know how it goes together. I've got numbers here. And the numbers match. Got double numbers here because one's the outside, one's the inside. So let me just flip it all to this side. Okay, there's the one. Okay, so my front, 1:1. This is gonna sit something like that. And I've got, this one is the one that won't match, so it's an unnumbered side. It will be here. And then I've got a 2 and a 3, a 2 and a 3. So I know it doesn't look like much, but now we're ready. We've got stock that we trust is perfectly square. We've taken care of our veneer. We don't have a lot of chipping, and everything's going to line up. Now we can start to cut joinery in the side of our box. Thanks for watching.